taking a worldly example of education right now, but before we went to school, our mind didn't know anything about math, didn't know about anything, so it was very limited. But still, it had the potential to learn. So this limited mind we could use to learn math and science and I don't know, Hebrew writing and grammar and so forth. So even though it is limited, we can utilize it. So it is precious in the sense that it holds an incredible potential to seek improvement. And this is what the precious human life is all about. That we have not enough limitations physically that keep us from transforming our mind, and also mentally we don't have the limitations that others have to seek improvement. That's called the precious human life. So even though overall it is limited, but in this lifetime we have the opportunity to change it. That's the precious human life. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Now, therefore here, what we need to do is use these opportunities, this precious human life, to become aware while being born, however positive we may look at it, and there is still some positive aspect to it, but there also is a lot of limitation, because the being born comes along with a lot of pain. Birth is not something that is in its nature wonderful, as we may think. No, it comes with pain. Pain for the mother, pain for the child. Right? And especially as a child. So here, one of the aims is to think, okay, I was born in this lifetime. I don't remember. Fine. Okay, that's okay. I don't remember. But if there are future lifetimes, and if I don't get out of the situation I am right now, I will experience this again and again and again and again. Again and again, I'll be in a woman's belly for 9 months. I'll be soaked in some kind of liquid, floating around, and when she jogs, I'm kind of like I mean, think about it in the womb. I mean, we have like a very romantic kind of idea of the womb, but let's be a little realistic. She eats hot food and you're like too much chili in the hummus, and whoa, what else? I don't know. The woman gets I don't know. She's hungry, and it's wow, that noise in your stomach, right? Or gas, no room, because the gas is kind of like spawning, and you're like squeezed in. I mean, like I'm talking about the embryo a little bigger. I mean, seriously, really do that meditation on just being in a woman that you don't even know, you haven't met her yet, right? So you're in her belly, and you're in that liquid. And you're totally at the whims of whatever she does, what she eats, what she drinks, I mean, she likes organic food. Great. She only likes chips and hamburgers. Maybe a little harder to be in that belly. What else? She experiences a lot of stress. Well, the stress hormones in her body become part of your body. So you have I mean, you can be just as laid back and relaxed as it can be, but she's stressed out, you're stressed out. Right? So, I mean, I don't need to go into all these details, but if you think about it, and then 9 months, and it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Luckily, you don't have a twin brother right next to you. Maybe you're on your own. That's okay. You've got a single room here. You don't have to share. Imagine you have like 3 or 4 of them. It's like a whole dormitory. But anyway, so think about it. I mean, worse than the dormitory you have here. You don't sleep in the same bed, at least, right? So anyway, the point is, like, we think of it as so romantic and protected. But seriously, if I were to tell you now, all right, you love the womb? 9 months. And you'd be like squeezed in oh my God, it's gross, right? I'm just, it's like, I don't know that woman, and I'm in her body fluid. I'm kind of floating around in her fluids. It's kind of gross, right? Anyway, and then you're born. So, I mean, however romantic but it's difficult. I mean, an embryo, it is difficult. I mean, I'm not saying anything more. I'm not putting down birth or something, but it's difficult. And then birth itself is very painful. I mean, that it doesn't kill the mother, it's a miracle that she survives the whole pregnancy. I mean, a cancer, this big can kill you, but a baby like that, it's a miracle. But it's incredible suffering. I mean, for the mother, gosh, I mean, how painful it is for the mother for 9 months, and then the birth process. Okay, so that's what this is talking about. Let's be realistic. Birth is painful, and everything that leads up to birth is painful. It's uncomfortable. It's not in the nature of happiness. That's the first type. And then when we are born, let's say we go through those 9 months. The woman who carried us went through incredible discomfort, right? Couldn't eat this, couldn't eat that. Her had back pains from the 5th month onwards. I don't know when it starts. Flat feet, and I don't know, whatever. Like the woman in whose belly we've grown in experienced a lot of problems, and we ourselves were, kind of in that tight spot for so long.
But is that the limbs when they come out?
Yeah.
It's also excruciating pain.
Yeah.
About, tooth
exactly.
Like the hands and the fingers and
Exactly. Imagine this very sensitive skin. And then suddenly you have to come, you're so tight and you can't, it's terrible if you think about it. No wonder we forget. Any kind of traumatic experience, usually our brain, we are able to deal with it by forgetting. So that's exactly what happens. We forget. Fortunately, the mother forgets. Otherwise, the world be like, there wouldn't be enough children anymore. A mother would do it once and never again. Right? That's what they say. I talk to my brothers and sisters about it. They say, fortunately, you forget. You forget, and then you do it all over again, right? If we didn't forget, no one would do it again, right? Okay, so that's number one, so the pain. And then we're born with already certain tendencies. That's the second type here. So birth, we are born with certain tendency, and a lot of them are negative, unfortunately. A lot of tendency we're born with, if you may remember, like little things at child, like when you were little. I have a tendency to steal. I was born with the tendency. My parents didn't teach me that. I was like, the moment I understood, I could just take my mom's money, I could buy sweets. Well, I went ahead. I was born with that tendency. I'm very much convinced. I also thought I was the best liar. I could lie to my dad, go like, Daddy, no, it wasn't me. I was very proud of me, how good I was at doing this. I would have kind of practiced a little bit, and then go, oh no, Dad, of course not. And Dad was like, no, my good girl. I had this tendency to lie and steal. I was born with that, seriously. And did it do me any favor? No. In the end, it just led to trouble. Okay, so this is like an example. We're born with certain tendency. We're not like a blank sheet. I wished I was, an innocent baby, and then my parents just messed up, and that's it. But it's not like that. We're born already. If there were past lives, well, we've already done certain things, and we have certain habits, have certain tendencies. And we may blame our parents for everything, but that's, from Buddha's point of view, very unrealistic. Yes, of course, they played part in it, but we were already born in a certain way. We had certain tendencies, and they were enhanced. And the fact we were born to certain parents, well, there's something, from a Buddhist point of view, as a cause we created in the past, we were born with them. It's the result of actions in the past. Yeah. So we have a terrible relationship sometimes with our parents because we just claim one cause. And I'm not saying our parents are not a cause for our problems, but there were so many other causes. Ourselves being born with certain tendencies, having created the karma to be born somewhere, well, we don't look at that actually, right? So anyway, the picture is much more complicated. And one of the aspects of birth, saying that it's in the nature of suffering, or talking about the suffering of birth, is that we're already born with these tendencies, with habituations that are difficult to undo. A lot of habits are very difficult to undo. Thirdly, birth is in the nature of suffering because it is the source of suffering. In other words, and a lot of this, you see, it's overlapping. It's not like you always get some new kind of facts explained here. But again, as with the pervasive suffering, we're born with a limited body and mind, which holds the potential to experience problems, difficulties, worries, and so forth. So that's why birth, in a way, we don't blame birth just that, but saying the fact we're born is also a cause or a condition, if you like, that is responsible for experiencing all the problems and difficulties we experience as we grow up. And then birth is in the nature of suffering, has the potential for suffering, because it's the source of afflictive emotions. Again, being born with this mind and body, in particular with this body, with this mind, well, it is the source. In other words, it's the beginning of, again, experiencing anger, jealousy, hatred, aggression, resentment, and so forth. Okay? And then lastly, birth is in the nature of suffering because it results in death. We cannot die unless we're born. Right? So death, no one likes to die. Well, I said yesterday, some people look forward to their death, but in general, most people don't like to die. Ordinary people don't like to die. Okay? I mean, even those people who look forward to their own death, it's not like they like to die, but they accepted that this is necessary, and so therefore, at least they enjoy it. Right? They accept that this is necessary and go ahead and experience it in the most positive way. But in the end, if we could continue to live forever, right, things will be much easier. Yes?
The term birth here, does it mean the actual time of birth or conception?
Conception, good question. What do you think from what it says in here?
Conception, because when you're conceived, then you already have the potential for death. Or then suddenly you will die.
Right, okay. But I would argue like the first one here more particularly deals with birth as in like being born from the womb, and with the rest you're right. You're right. Actually, in terms of the word for birth in Tibetan, the Tibetan word can refer to both. Refer to conception, as like a semen enters the egg, like let's just talk about human birth. So the moment of conception referring to that moment, if you talk about conception in a womb. But it can also refer to birth from the womb itself. So yes, if you talk about conception, then the first type of the suffering of conception, I mean, I don't think there is any suffering at that time, because all you have is an egg, a sperm, and then a consciousness enters the fertilized egg. So in that moment, I don't believe there is any pain yet, because the consciousness is too subtle that enters the egg, and I don't think there's any pain yet. But then slowly, as you grow, then discomfort and pain and so forth with this body start arising. I don't know whether there's mental suffering when you're conceived, as in like entering the fertilized egg. But then here it's more particularly talking about the birth from the womb itself, when the child is fully developed, the senses are all fully developed, so then the experience of suffering is much greater. Yeah. So if you think of them in both ways, it's probably the most complete way to think about it. Yeah. So birth as in conception and actual birth itself. All right. So it's also the source of afflictive, and its birth is also, it's in the nature of suffering because it results in an unwanted separation, which basically means because of birth we will die. Okay. So we wouldn't die. The cause of our own death is our own birth. It sounds a little contradictory. It almost seems that the cause for our death is a different one than our own birth. But it's explained, for example, that a sprout, like a little sprout that arises from a seed. The seed is the cause for the production of the sprout, but it's also the cause for the destruction of the sprout. So the seed is responsible for both, not just for the creation of the sprout, but the seed is also responsible. Nivet. Nivet. Okay, so the seed is not only responsible for the sprout itself, but it's also responsible for the destruction of the sprout. Sounds weird, right? Doesn't it? That one thing can be responsible for both the production and the disintegration of that same object. Okay, so therefore, being born again, we may feel, okay, let's say there are future lives. Okay, let's say there are. So I'm going to be born again and again. Yeah, lovely. You know, maybe the initial reaction would be like, oh, I'd love that. But think again. Really? Again and again and again? I mean, once is okay, maybe one more time. But then it's enough. Okay? All right, so that's the suffering of birth that is described here. And the next one is the suffering of aging. Okay? Which, in this lifetime, we're going to experience? maybe we are already experiencing, and we will again and again in the future unless we do something about it. If there really is future lives, as is the Buddhists claim, well, then we experience this again and again. So aging, what is the suffering of aging? Now, actually, usually when we talk about aging, we speak of getting old. But honestly, in every stage, there's suffering of aging. I mean, as a child, once you grow older, there are different types of sufferings associated with growing older. I mean, I've mentioned a few here. Teething pain. I don't know, my own teething pain. I don't remember that. When your teeth start growing, you experience teething pain. I certainly remember when I was growing up, I was experiencing growing pain. I remember at nighttime, I would have my bones would be aching. I'd be achy all over, and I'd be like screaming for my parents, and I couldn't do anything. I remember these pains I had. So those are just physical. And then the first day of kindergarten. Oh, gosh, all these weird children. And the kindergarten teacher, unlike my parents, did not think I was the center of the universe. How dare they? I remember all these kind of tantrums I threw and all the stuff I did to get their attention, and they just wouldn't give me the same attention as my parents. I was suffering, right? And then the first day of school, fortunately I got a huge bag of sweets. That kind of made things a little easier. I don't know, in Germany we get these kind of bags full of sweets, and it's kind of like a parents' bribe, to make children go, and new clothes and stuff. But I was pretty much terrified. And then it was high school. I mean, all these stages in our life, they're suffering. Come on, there's a lot of worry. There's a lot of, especially as children, you don't know what's going on. You don't make the decision yourself. You're pretty much under the whims of your parents. You don't know why. You don't like to go to school. They make you go, right? And then you get bullied or not, or you bully others. Don't feel really happy doing it, but you still do it. And so forth. The list is endless. And then puberty. Gosh, finally it's a little bit of freedom, and then your hormones go crazy. Great, thank you very much. And then high school. Oh, right? Those two. It's not my favorite time, to tell you the truth, right? And then you've gone behind that. Okay, so maybe then you go travel. There's a bit of freedom, but then you experience bed bugs and traveling and the army, of course. That's not really joyful. And then you travel, you put yourself into suffering yourself. Live in dormitories and whatever, bed bugs and stuff. And then you get married, and then you start having wrinkles, and then you have wrinkles and wrinkles and more wrinkles and more wrinkles, and body gets weaker and weak. That's life. Come on, let's face it. So all these changes. Okay. So the suffering of aging. Here it goes like all the way to the handsome body deteriorates. Right? When does it start? 30. My first wrinkle started. My 30th birthday, even though I was a nun, I was like, I'm 30. Oh my God. I was a nun, and still it was so strong. It really hit me. Shit, I'm no longer young. I'm 30. Right? I remember that. It's very funny. Anyway, later it got easier. But 30 was weird. I'm no longer. And it was such a short time, really. You kind of feel young from the age of 16 to 29. And then you're like, that's not very long, really. And not like life was easy and wonderful all the time. And then really from 30 onwards, couldn't do the same thing as before. Wrinkles started, white hair, gray hair, all that started, Gravity sets in. All that became noticeable, right? So I noticed my body's changing. How weird. I couldn't do the same things I used to be able to do. And it just gets worse. It just gets worse. Incredible. It just goes down from then onwards. So if you live until the age of 90, most of your life you're old. No. In the West, we don't say old, we say elderly, because there are no old people any longer, right? We're just elderly. But seriously, we're elderly most of the time. Of course, it's all relative. Yeah, for a 10-year-old, I've been elderly since I'm 12. But of course, it's relative. But let's face it, it's kind of bizarre. Yeah, it's just aging. It's very much part of life. We hate it, but it's just, we age all the time, of course. But I guess maybe my sense of being elderly now started at 30. I was like, oh my God. So, the handsome body deteriorates. Okay? Our skin loses its freshness. No more collagen. Is that what it's called? Right? You need to buy expensive products to replace it, and then it never works anyway. Becomes wrinkly, our hair turns gray, and our body bends over. Okay, let's make sure that doesn't happen right now. But, still, okay, it's a little later down the line, but we become less attractive and desirable, right? Honestly, okay? So when are we most attractive and desirable? I don't know, 16 to 25 maybe? I don't know. Seriously, when does a model stop being called for shots? I guess that's the time you can, I don't know. I'm just kidding, but the thing is, there's something to it. Of course, it depends on how we really feel, but there's also a consensus, in society, right? And it seems we're young really long when we are young, and suddenly those few years are over, and you look back, and it's like, where's the time gone? I remember thinking that, that was too short. That was actually too short. I was thinking that should be a little bit longer. They should make that period a little longer. Be like a teenager until the age of 60. But that's probably harder because in those 10 years, it's actually, because there's one quote that's given, we are lucky, aging is so terrible, we are lucky it's slow. Right? There's a quote by the Kadamba Geshe Gamapa. He says, it is well that aging happens little by little. If it happened all at once, it would be intolerable. Right? Imagine you be all the way to 70, you all look the same, and then one day, wow, I think people would just kill themselves. So we're lucky it's so slow that we don't notice it, actually, at least not over on a daily basis. Okay. All right, so our handsome body deteriorates. Physical strength and vigor deteriorate. Okay, so we have a lot of strength and energy when we're young. We can work hard and easily accomplish what we set out to do. But then the older we get, the harder this becomes, right? Let's be realistic. Things that we could previously do over hours, we can no longer do. So that's also, so if you experience this already now you know what I'm talking about. If you're now still young and fresh, well, either you die before that or you experience it. You will experience it. There's no other way around. Unless old age kills you, you'll experience that. So I don't know which one would you choose. I don't know. At some point, we would probably think, it's better I die at that time. But once we get to that age, I don't think we would wish that at that time. Now we think, I don't want to die. I want to live up to 90. But once you're 89, I think you change your mind. It's not like, right, now it's time to go. Of course, some people feel that way, and they may actually kill themselves. My grandmother did that. When she reached the age of 80, she killed herself. Kind of bizarre, but it doesn't happen all the time. So
the alternative is birth, so we might as well.
Right, her alternative is just being crammed in those 9-month kind of belly again, or if she's lucky to be born as a human being. Yeah, right. From a Buddhist point of view, I don't know what's worse. Anyway, physical strength and vigor deteriorate. Then the senses deteriorate. Let's be honest. Now I need to already take off my glasses, Previously I didn't have to do that. Now if I want to read something, I have to do that. In old age, our senses deteriorate. We cannot see, hear, or smell properly anymore. Right? At some point, it gets... Gradually, our memory starts fading. That's scary. I've always had memory. So now I'm wondering, is that my usually forgetting something, or am I already... you start wondering. Okay. We forget people's names and are unable to recall what we did yesterday or even an hour ago. It gets worse as you go on, right? Okay. So that's another part of aging. Then, enjoyment of sense objects fade. Okay, so sense objects no longer provide us with the same pleasure as before. Our appetite weakens, and even our favorite food does no longer taste the way it used to. And if we're, with some of our teeth missing, we have difficulty chewing. So even if our favorite food still tastes the same, we may not have the teeth to be able to chew it. Well, thanks God, we live in a progressive country, so at least we can get artificial teeth. So this was written by people in Tibet. When you lose your teeth, you lose your teeth. Nothing left. Okay. Our digestion is weakened, and after a meal, we may feel physically uncomfortable. Even tactile sensations, such as sexual activity, no longer hold any attraction, or we are physically unable to indulge in them. So in other words, the physical kind of activities, sensual kind of activities we used to enjoy, we can't, right? I mean, even watching a movie, we may not understand what's going on. We forget the plot. We, can't see it properly. I mean, that's just, if we survive until then, that's what's going to happen. That's our existence right now. So again, I just want to remind you, I don't like to be pessimistic. I'm just saying, let's be realistic. It's realistic. This is what's going to happen. And it'll happen again and again and again and again. Okay? If there's future lives. Yeah, if you're human, exactly. Yes. Assuming we're human, exactly. Could be much worse, you're right. Very true. Yes, Wanda?
That's what I wanted to ask.
Yes.
In which stage
Mm-hmm.
do we know in which realm we will be?
At what stage do we know? Can you say?
Which realm?
Which realm we're going to be born. I guess the moment we're born, we know. We don't know in advance. That's the other thing. I mean, I don't know what I want to know, but let's say we would be able to know where we're going to be reborn, in which realm. So she's talking about being born as a human, or maybe as an animal, or maybe as a different form of existence. Of course, again, we don't know whether that's, animal. We do accept the existence of animals. But of course, from a Buddhist point of view, there are other forms of existence that right now we just cannot perceive. And so it's hard to believe in them. But again, I would suggest to have that same attitude. There's a possibility they exist. So then, how do we know we're going to be reborn there? We don't know. The only thing,
If you're a Buddha, you may know
in advance, yes.
previously.
Yeah. If you're highly advanced, you don't even have to be a Buddha. But even if you're highly advanced, you may know. You may actually be able to control where you go. So that's all the beautiful aspects. Of course, this is all part of this exercise to recognize our limitations right now, and from there understand we can change it, and we can actually come to a stage where we can control our rebirth. But at this point, that's not what happens. That's not what we can do. And at this point, it's totally uncontrollable, right? The one thing they can do, if there really is future lives, accumulate the causes for the best possible, right? Like I said, again, it's a win-win situation. If there is future lives, let's accumulate the causes for the best possible scenario. And then if there isn't, at least we die without regret. Okay? Because whatever creates the best scenario means you engage in moral and ethical and beneficial actions. Okay. All right. Anyway. So then suffering of the diminishments of one's lifespan. Oh, yes. So this refers to the misery of realizing that we get closer to death, right? I mean, like right now, we may think, okay, most people live until the age of 90 or 80 these days, I guess, right? But first of all, we don't know how long we're going to live. I mean, no one can guarantee us that we don't die at the age of 35 tomorrow. We have no idea. But even let's say we do die at an advanced age, well, every day we get closer to our own death. And the older we get, I guess, if you reach already the age of 70, every day could be my last day. Because just statistically, so many people die, let's say at the age of 80. So you reach the age of 80, and it could be your last day. I don't know what it's like. I don't remember being 80. I was 80 many times in the past from a Buddhist point of view. I don't remember. But I assume that you wake up in the morning and you may just push away the thought and may just ignore it. But if you allow the thought to arise, you may think, well, this may be my last day, and it may be very scary. Have to leave everything behind. Very scary. So this is the kind of suffering of the diminishments of one's lifetime. In particular, one undergoes the suffering of regret for not having made one's life most meaningful. It's possible that one looks back at one's life and just has regret. So of course, in order for that not to arise, we can do right away, we can do something. Make sure that there won't be any regrets, that at least we've done everything we wanted to do. On top of that, there's the dread of not knowing what will come after death and where we will go. It's scary, right? Okay. So, and then there are some quotes that I've cited here. I don't need to read them. And then it says the same thing here again. So the Kadamba Geshe Kelsang said, the suffering of death is horrible, but brief. How horrible is aging? Yeah, so it's talking, this is still about aging here. Actually, of the true suffering of death is terrible, but it's brief. It's just one moment you're there, one next moment you're gone. So you know you're dying, probably in that moment. If it's not a totally sudden death, if you don't get shot in the head, then I guess you know you're dying. But that's relatively brief. Aging is much longer if you live long enough to experience it. Okay? All right. So those are the different types of aging. What time am I supposed to do a break? At 10:30? Yeah, I got 15 minutes. So then there's the suffering of sickness. Okay, so sickness. We may experience sickness right now. We may be well. We may never get sick. But there is no guarantee. No one can guarantee you. No one can guarantee you you're not going to get sick. Right? Is there anyone? I mean, even if they can, you can't believe them. You don't know. If someone tells you, no, you never get sick, you don't know whether you can believe them. So the thing is, this is something potentially we may experience. So, first of all, when we get sick, it changes our body. Sickness could be experienced at any time, and it changes our body. So we lose our strength, we feel weak and tired, and we cannot do the activities we usually like to do. Our face looks drawn, hollow-cheeked and haggard, eyes puffy and bloodshot. So it really goes into all the kind of extreme cases. But anyway, our skin changes, we have no control over our bowel movement, our breathing changes, we lose our muscle tone. Anyway, so basically physically everything goes wrong. And worse, mental sickness. Terrible. Terrible to have a mental sickness. Right? It's very difficult. Of course, there's certain degrees in a way. From a Buddhist point of view, we all have mental sickness. But there's certain degrees of being able to live a life to some degree, or to not be able to look after yourself, not be able to leave your house, being under constant care, terrible. God, if you think about people who go through this, it's terrible. It's much worse than the body. And do we have any guarantee it doesn't happen to us? We don't. Potentially it could happen to us. Some gene in the body that hasn't manifested yet, that hasn't, I don't know, caused the disease yet, but we could experience it. And if it's not anything, it could be Alzheimer or dementia when we grow older. No guarantee. And again, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but it's realistic, right? I can just watch a good movie and ignore it, but the movie will end at some point. And if I'm at least prepared, it makes all the difference. I expect that. All right, so it's better to be prepared than to be surprised by something like that. And of course, I may experience this in future lifetimes again and again and again. Then the next point is that pain and anguish increase and are seldom absent. So not only physically, if I'm physically sick, do I experience all the symptoms, mentally, if there's a mental problem, but there's also incredible pain and fear and depression. Right? I mean, it usually comes along with fear and anxiety and anguish and depression and so forth. So that's also what disease causes. So it's not only if we have, let's say we have a mental or physical problem, it's not just the problem in itself. We're depressed on top of it. We're scared, we're fearful on top of that. So that adds to the problem. Then there's no desire to enjoy pleasant objects. We use our ability to enjoy life because it's still possible to enjoy life. Buddhism doesn't talk about not enjoying life. It's saying enjoy it with all its limitations. Don't have unrealistic expectations. But when we get sick, we can't even enjoy that. Okay? Then there's the suffering of having to engage in unpleasant experiences. So when we're sick, not only can we no longer enjoy pleasant objects, but we have to undergo treatment which may be painful, right? For example, surgery, terrible, or chemotherapy, or what else? Doing physiotherapy, which is painful, doing certain exercises. We cannot eat the kind of foods we like to eat, instead have to eat foods that we despise. Right? Have to do certain exercises, have to do movement, engage in movements in our body that are painful, and so forth. So there's so much with regard to sickness. And then one loses eventually one's energy, one's vital energy, and one dies. So sickness can also lead to death. So these are birth, aging, and sickness. They're all part of our lives. Let's just face it. Right? I mean, is there anyone who's 100% sure? Well, we're all born, that's for sure. We experience that. But anyone who's not going to go through aging? No. Anyone who's never going to become sick, who knows for sure they're not going to experience that? No. It could happen to all of us. So again, let's just be realistic. Of course, please remember, we're talking about how to overcome that. It's not like we leave it at that. That would be cruel. If the Buddha had only taught the first truth and then said, okay, he would have never taught about it. He would have never spoke about it if there was no cure. Okay? Yeah, I wouldn't be stuck in that. So then let's not talk about it. Let's just ignore it. That's the best solution. But of course, we're only mentioning it because there's a solution. And then the suffering of death. Right? Suffering of death. So one has to separate from the first part is one has to when it's separated from objects of enjoyment that are pleasant and beloved. So all the things we accumulated, we worked so hard. There's not a single thing we can take with us. Isn't that bizarre? We spend so much time and energy to accumulate the things we have, and we cannot take anything with us. So I love these two lines here in a sutra. It says, a king goes leaving behind his kingdom. A beggar goes leaving behind his staff. So really, when a beggar and a king die, there's no difference. One leaves behind a stick, and the other one an empire. But both are equal that they cannot take anything with them. So really, to accumulate an empire works so hard. Only to leave it behind? Is it really worth it? We think about it. We don't think along those lines. It's so interesting when you watch documentaries, and the documentaries are only interesting because those are the extreme forms of what we do ourselves. So a documentary about these kings of the past, like they show these palaces that they built. Oh, incredible palaces. They must have had such a strong sense they're going to live forever, right? Build these incredible, pyramids are another example. Okay, there was definitely a sense they're going to die, but there's a sense of an afterlife where they can enjoy all these things. So of course, from a Buddhist point of view, no way. But the sense like you're going to live forever, so these empires they're built, and then they just die. Work so hard, spend all this energy in something that is worthless, useless. Right? So that's the point. You have to leave everything behind. So whether you're a beggar or a king, when you die, you're equal.
It's not considered greater suffering?
Pardon?
It's not considered greater suffering?
Oh, absolutely. Of course, yes. Implied in that is, of course, it's probably easier for a beggar to die than it is for a king. I don't know. Depends on the beggar, of course. But if you're a poor person, you don't have so much to leave behind. Poor means, I'm not talking about your loved ones and so forth. I'm just talking about material things. At least, you see, there's the pain of leaving behind your loved ones. That comes now. But we're just talking about leaving behind material things. That's painful. That's difficult. Right? It's difficult to maybe coming to this retreat, having to leave behind your comforts at home. But that's just temporary. Right? Your comfortable mattress or whatever. But here you're leaving behind much more, forever. Okay? And that's just material things. So in a way, you're right, a person who is rich and leaves, depending on how much they hold on to those material things. Of course, some people can go easily. The better you're prepared for your own death, the easier it is. Okay? It's all part of being prepared. If you just give it to someone you already gave everything away, you're happily, it's okay. So from a Buddhist point of view, that's seen as very good. Make us a very clear will. Make sure everything is sorted out. Then when the time of death comes, no worry. But anyway, yes, it's true. The more we attach to our wealth, the harder it is when we die. Okay. Then one is separated from close relatives who are pleasant and beloved. Very difficult. Leave behind your children, your parents, your siblings. It's very difficult. We have to leave them behind. Each and every one of them. Then we're separated from companions, from close friends who are beloved and pleasant, who we love and who we're close to. We're separated from our body. Gosh, this body. So much time and money and energy spent for this body. Right? Depends on what you do, but the kind of products we buy to beautify it, to feed it, organic food is not cheap. Certain foods that we buy, certain things. And there's nothing wrong with it. But in the end, it deserts us. We have to let it go. That's not easy. We have a very special relationship to our body. And, it is precious as long as we have it. We should preserve it. We should look after it and so forth. But we have to leave it behind. And the younger it is and the fitter it is, the harder it is. When we lie there dying, we have to leave it behind. And at the time of death, one experiences terrible suffering and distress. Possibly, I'm not saying everyone, but there's a potential for experiencing in distress and so forth if we're not prepared to experience these problems. Okay. All right. So those are the types. So the suffering of birth, death, aging, sickness, and death. Right? Okay. I have a few more minutes. 2 or 3 more minutes. But then we also have 4 other types as part of the 8 types. So another type of suffering is the suffering of encountering what is unpleasant. Like I said, it's overlaps. We've already talked about things that we experience, such as birth and aging. They're all things that are unpleasant. But in general, so much that can happen. Here, it basically mainly refers to other people. It's interesting because I guess in Tibet, that was considered to be much more of a problem of encountering someone one doesn't like. Here the word is called enemy, but enemy is a very strong word. Enemy, the word is, again, it's one of those blanket terms where like you use the most extreme word in order to include other things that are kind of less extreme. For example, the word suffering includes any kind of unpleasant feeling. So enemy includes anyone you don't like. Anyone who makes you feel uncomfortable, anyone who harms you is considered to be, in the Buddhist context, an enemy. You don't use the word enemy in everyday life like that. If you don't like someone, you don't call them your enemy. But it's that kind of blanket term they use. So, refers to someone you dislike. So when you work with someone, again, on a day-to-day basis, so let's say you don't experience the suffering of aging, sickness, or death at a certain time in your life, right? But then you have to go to work every day. You meet people you don't like. It's difficult, isn't it? To work with someone on a daily basis you don't like. Now, you don't have that problem if you're a monk and nun. You don't choose the other monks and nuns you're with. You're together with people, you're thrown together with people you would ordinarily never seek their company. I mean, you would probably not want to hang out with them. So whether you're a religious person or you're, in our daily life, we're always encountering people that we may not like, or who may not like us. We may like them, they don't like us. Very difficult. We haven't done anything to them. They just don't like us. What can we do? So, encountering that. Being physically harmed by these people. Okay, in Israel, that's a possibility. Right? In Israel? Yeah, of course.
Germany too?
Of course, also in Germany, but I'm not in Germany. Of course, in Germany, that's true. But in Israel, it's kind of like right now the situation, So that may happen, being harmed, physically harmed. Being robbed, of course, all that. Then one feels, and not just being physically harmed, but people spreading rumors about oneself, being people spreading rumors, being malicious and so forth. Then one dreads, there's death, something very, something we don't like, something very unpleasant. And then it says here number 5 is that one fears that due to one's non-dharmic activities, one will be reborn in a suffering existence. So if we do accept future lives and we see that as a possibility, there's also, of course, fear of what's going to be in the future. But just in this lifetime, I mean, these are kind of the points that are in the Lamrim. But in everyday life, losing our job, losing our health insurance, losing our home, cannot pay the mortgage. I mean, all these things that could happen, right? So let's be realistic. All this may happen. We may lose our spouses, our parents, our children. It could happen anytime. Okay? All right, anyway, let's take a break. I feel so pessimistic. I'm really sorry. But I'm glad we start with the negative stuff at the beginning and then it goes just up from there. So anyway, enjoy your break, which is in the nature of suffering. Enjoy that.